बच्चों, घर से आज बाहर मत निकलना। आज दिवाली का दिन है, तो सारे बच्चे आज पटाखे जला रहे होंगे। तुम भी जल जाओगे उस पटाखे से। लेकिन मम्मी, हम यूं ही भूखे प्यासे दिन भर घर में ही रहेंगे। हाँ, आज कोई भी घर से बाहर नहीं जाएगा, समझे?
चिंकी, कितना मजा आ रहा है दिवाली मनाते हुए। ये देखो, दोनों फुलझड़ी कितना सुंदर दिख रहा है। तुम भी यहाँ आओ और दिवाली मनाओ। नहीं, मुझे पटाखों से बहुत डर लगता है। मैं दिवाली नहीं मनाऊंगी। तुम दोनों डरते रहो। ये देखो, मैं रॉकेट उड़ाने जा रहा हूँ, वो भी हाथ में लेकर। अरे बाबू, अभी तू बहुत छोटा है। रॉकेट मत उड़ा, नहीं तो तू जल जाएगा। चुप डरपोक कहीं की। ये देख, अब रॉकेट उड़ेगा। उड़ने लगा रॉकेट, उड़ने लगा।
Oh, no!
अरे बाबू, ये तूने क्या कर दिया? देखो, रॉकेट बिल्लियों के घर की तरफ जा रहा है।
Oh, no!
तो क्या हो जाएगा? मेरा रॉकेट तो अब उड़ गया। अरे बाबू, बिल्लियों के घर में आग लग सकती है और वो जल जाएंगी। चुप कर, कुछ नहीं होगा। मम्मी, भूकंप आ गया, बादल फट गया। डरो मत बच्चों। लगता है किसी ने हमारे घर के पास एक बड़ा पटाखा फोड़ दिया है। बाप रे, बहुत तेज आवाज आया है मम्मी। मैं तो पूरी तरह हिल गया।
Oh, no!
अरे बाबू, तूने बिल्लियों के घर में आग लगा दिया। उस घर के अंदर तो बहुत सारे बिल्लियों के बच्चे रहते हैं। अरे हाँ चिंटू, उन बिल्लियों के घर में तो आग लग गई। अब क्या होगा बिल्लियों का? अरे चुप रहो तुम दोनों, मरने दो बिल्लियों को। उनसे हमें क्या लेना देना? तू तो बहुत ही घटिया बाबू है रे। चल चिंकी, हम घर से बाल्टी में पानी लाकर आग को बुझाते हैं। हाँ, जल्दी चल चिंटू। मम्मी, मुझे ऐसा लग रहा है कि कहीं कुछ तो जल रहा है। धुएं की महक आ रही है। अरे बाबू, कुछ और नहीं, हमारा घर जल रहा है। किसी ने पटाखे से हमारे घर में आग लगा दिया है। तो क्या अब हम जल जाएंगे? मुझे तो बहुत डर लग रहा है मम्मी। डरो मत, मैं तुम्हें कुछ नहीं होने दूंगी। रुको, मैं घर के दरवाजे को खोलने की कोशिश करती हूँ। तब तुम सब जल्दी से घर से बाहर निकल जाना। मम्मी, क्या कर रही हो? जल्दी दरवाजा खोलो ना। अरे बाबू, लगता है घर जलने से घर का दरवाजा जाम हो गया है। ये अब खुल नहीं रहा। लगता है अब हम नहीं बचने वाले मम्मी। रुको, मैं दरवाजे को तोड़ती हूँ। आग पकड़ लिया, आग पकड़ लिया, भागो। अब फटेगा वो पटाखा। फट गया, फट गया, फट गया पटाखा। बाप रे, हालत खराब हो गई नल से बाल्टी में पानी भरने में। मुझसे तो ये बाल्टी उठ भी नहीं रहा, बहुत भारी है। दम लगा के उठाओ बाल्टी को और चलो। देखो, बिल्लियों के घर में आग पूरी तरह पकड़ लिया है।
Oh, no!
अरे हाँ चिंटू, जल्दी चलो, हमें आग बुझाना ही होगा। अरे बाबू, तू वहाँ बिल्लियों के घर में आग लगा कर यहाँ नाच रहा है। तू तो बहुत ही कमीना है रे। अरे तू जाना रे, मुझे नाचने दे। इसे छोड़ चिंटू, जल्दी चल, हम आग बुझाते हैं पानी डालकर। हाँ चल जल्दी। मेरे बच्चों, घर का दरवाजा भी नहीं टूट रहा। अब पता नहीं क्या होगा हमारा। मम्मी, हमें तो बहुत डर लग रहा है। मेरे पास में आ जाओ सब, मैं तुम्हें बचाऊंगी आग से। अरे चिंकी, दो बाल्टी पानी डाल दिया, फिर भी आग नहीं बुझा। चिंटू, चलो उस घर के दरवाजे को तोड़ देते हैं। बिल्लियाँ घर से बाहर निकल जाएंगी तो बच जाएंगी। लेकिन कैसे तोड़े? देखो, वहाँ पर एक मोटा लकड़ी का खंभा है, उसे उठाकर तोड़ो दरवाजा। ठीक है, अब तू देख मैं कैसे तोड़ता हूँ दरवाजे को। मम्मी, देखो घर का दरवाजा टूट गया। चलो जल्दी से घर से भागो मेरे बच्चों। बच गए मम्मी, हम बच गए। तुम सब ठीक तो हो बिल्लियों? तुम्हें कुछ हुआ तो नहीं? हम सब तो ठीक हैं, लेकिन हमारे घर में आग लगाया किसने, बताओ मुझे। मेरे बाबू ने लगाया आग। देखो, वो वहाँ नाच रहा है तुम्हारे घर में आग लगाकर।
ये मेरी तरफ आ रही है मुझे काटने के लिए। भागो रे दादा।
Shadow was not an ordinary cat. He was a silent observer of the world, a soft-footed creature whose every whisker seemed tuned to the hidden frequencies of life, and from the moment he opened his bright amber eyes to the dim warmth of the attic where he was born, he began absorbing the mysteries around him with a curiosity that never dulled, not even as he grew from a fragile kitten into a sleek, confident feline whose presence could calm a storm or stir a quiet room into laughter, depending on his mood. He wandered through the old house like a king surveying his kingdom, brushing his tail against the cracked walls, sniffing the fading scent of ancient books, listening to the muffled creaks of wooden floors that had carried generations of footsteps, and though Shadow never spoke a human word, he communicated in ways far more eloquent, through the flick of an ear, the narrowing of his eyes, or the low rumble of a purr that vibrated like a hidden engine of warmth inside his chest, and the family who lived with him learned to read his gestures with an affection that bordered on reverence, because Shadow was not just a pet but a companion whose silent company offered comfort during sleepless nights, whose gentle nudges broke tension during arguments, and whose playful leaps across the living room carpet dissolved gloomy afternoons into moments of unexpected joy, especially for the youngest child, Aiden, who considered Shadow his closest friend, his nighttime guardian, and the keeper of secrets he was too shy to share with anyone else. Whenever Aiden had a bad day at school, bullied by louder kids or scolded for mistakes he barely understood, Shadow would leap into his lap with a wisdom that felt almost human, curling his body into a perfect circle of trust, shielding the boy from the world with nothing but soft fur and steady warmth, and Aiden believed, no, he knew, that Shadow understood everything without needing to ask, though the adults laughed gently at the idea, brushing it off as a child's imagination, but they didn't see what Aiden saw. The intelligence in Shadow's gaze, the way his ears twitched when someone lied, the way he positioned himself between two arguing people as if absorbing the emotional static that crackled in the air, or the strangely attentive way he studied the moon through the attic window, as though remembering some ancient story older than any human memory. And speaking of stories, the house itself seemed to whisper old tales that only Shadow could hear, tales carried through drafts that slipped between window cracks at night, tales buried in dust that drifted from forgotten corners, tales woven into the web spun by spiders in the shadowed beams above the staircase, and Shadow listened to them all, storing them like precious feathers inside his secret heart, sometimes pacing restlessly as if wrestling with ancient echoes only he could perceive, especially on windy nights when the sky turned bruised purple and thunder growled in the distance, vibrating through the walls like the warning call of an unseen beast. And during such nights, instead of hiding under the bed like other cats might, Shadow would sit tall at the center of the living room, tail curled neatly around his paws, eyes glowing with eerie calm as lightning flickered across the windows, casting his silhouette like a sentinel guarding something sacred, and the family, though puzzled, always felt safer with him nearby, as if some intuitive part of them understood that Shadow was more than a fragile creature of flesh and bone. He was their shield in ways even they couldn't explain, yet Shadow also loved adventure, and every dawn he slipped out through the slightly loose screen door, no matter how many times they tried repairing it, to explore the garden, the alleyways, the abandoned greenhouse behind the neighbor's yard, and the sprawling oak whose roots curled like ancient knuckles gripping the earth, and wherever he went, he moved with the dignified grace of a creature who believed the world belonged to him, pausing occasionally to stare at butterflies with scientific curiosity, or to chase drifting leaves like a playful child who momentarily forgot his responsibilities. And though Shadow often ventured far, he never failed to return by lunchtime, as if guided by an internal compass pointing him back to the warm kitchen where the smell of soup and bread lingered in the air, and where the mother of the house always greeted him with a fond smile and a small dish of chicken she pretended not to set aside just for him. One afternoon, however, everything changed when Shadow didn't return on time. The sun climbed high, then dipped lower, casting long shadows across the yard, but the family heard no soft meow at the door, no gentle thump of paws landing on the porch step, and Aiden grew increasingly anxious, calling Shadow's name until his throat grew raw, running through the neighborhood with trembling hands clutching a flashlight even though daylight still lingered. And as the hours passed, worry turned to fear, fear turned to panic, and panic turned to a hollow ache that gripped the house like a cold hand squeezing a warm heart. But Shadow was not lost. In fact, he was further from the house than he had ever wandered, drawn into the thick woods at the edge of town, where the silence was strange and the trees stood like tall guardians whispering in voices only he could understand. And though something unusual called him deeper into the forest, a scent, a memory, a force. Shadow felt neither fear nor hesitation, only purpose, as he moved through fallen leaves that crunched beneath his paws like brittle paper, through soft shafts of golden light that filtered through the trees like quiet blessings, until he reached a clearing he had never seen before, a place where the air felt heavy with meaning, where the world seemed to pause, listening, waiting, and at the center of the clearing stood a stone, ancient, cracked, covered in moss and strange markings, and Shadow approached it with a reverence that did not belong to any ordinary cat, touching it gently with his paw, and the moment he did, the forest erupted with life, wind spiraled upward, leaves swirled like confetti in the air, and a deep, resonant hum echoed from the stone, filling the clearing with vibrations that tickled Shadow's whiskers, and he closed his eyes as if remembering a forgotten duty, as if awakening from a long sleep, and for a moment the world seemed to shift around him, the sky bending colors, the earth pulsing beneath him, but then, as suddenly as it began, everything stilled. Shadow opened his eyes and the stone lay quiet again, as if nothing had happened, but something inside Shadow had changed, a soft spark glowing behind his eyes, a strength in his step, as though he now carried a piece of the forest's ancient wisdom within him. He returned home just before dawn, exhausted but unharmed, and the moment Aiden saw him on the doorstep, muddy and tired but alive, the boy burst into tears and wrapped his arms tightly around him, whispering promises of never letting him out of sight again, though Shadow merely purred, knowing he would always return, no matter how far he wandered, because the bond between him and this family, especially Aiden, was stronger than any secret calling of the forest, stronger than the ancient hum that still echoed faintly in his bones, and in the days that followed, Shadow behaved almost normally, but there were subtle differences the family couldn't quite explain. He stared longer at the window when the moon was full, he sat beside the old oak tree in the yard as if listening for whispers in its bark, and sometimes at night, when the house was quiet and the wind gentle, Aiden could swear he heard a soft humming sound, like the distant echo of the forest stone, vibrating from Shadow's chest along with his purr, as if reminding them that every creature, no matter how small, how ordinary, how familiar, may carry within them a story bigger than the world around them, a mystery that binds them to ancient rhythms, to forgotten paths, to places where magic still lingers in the air like dust caught in a sunbeam, and though Shadow never left for so long again, he continued to wander, to explore, to listen, to protect, and to love in the quiet, powerful way only a cat like him could, and the family eventually came to believe what Aiden had always known. Shadow was not just a cat. He was a guardian, a storyteller, a silent keeper of secrets who walked softly through their lives with a wisdom far older than his years, leaving behind not pawprints but memories, moments, and a sense of wonder that would stay with them forever.